Hi everyone. Uh, my name is Nekita Lamour. Welcome to another episode, another program of Diaspora Voice. Diaspora Voice is a program that aims to really reach out to blacks in the diaspora. Being from an immigrant background, we tend to speak more about what's going on in our native countries. But this program that I will do is mainly about what is happening in blacks among us black people living especially in the western world, in the US, in France, and in Canada. So I intend to have it in three languages. Sometimes I will do it in Creole, sometimes I will do it in French, other times I will do it in English. So living in the US as an immigrant, I've noticed that, as I said, the Haitian immigrant, the attention is on Haiti, even though we are raising another generation. I mean, those who came here during the mass migration of the 1980s, they are having kids now. So we have to think of not having next generation of the third, of the future generations of immigrants, of black immigrants in the country. So I'm talking about current immigration. I can go to 57, that when Haitians started to come here, the late 50s, upon the ascent of Papa Doc, Francois Duvalier into power. That's when he started, attacking or oppressing the middle class, and the educated professionals had to leave because of Papa Doc's oppression. Then in the 80s, we have the mass migration that came because of oppression and economic factors. But for 40 years, those who were born in the 80s, so they are 40s. Those who were born in the 90s, they are in their 30s now, as we go into the 21st century. So we have to start thinking about those. We have to start thinking about our involvement in the Western world where we are living. So my programs will focus primarily on education, and as an educator with a formal theological background, I have a degree with the Jesuits, and I also studied at Xavier University from a black Catholic perspective. I had theology from a black perspective, so that will be embedded in part of my presentations or conversations on the blacks in the diaspora, and also civic participation. How are we involved in issues from our streets, from our sidewalks, from our potholes to City Hall? Because as Tip O'Neill used to say, all politics are local. So how we as black immigrants are involved in the local political process. So these are those three elements that the programs that I intend to talk about: education, faith, and civic participation. But the one on civic participation had been in my mind since 2020. So I was involved in 2019 in a campaign of the first Haitian American elected in Everett, Massachusetts. So I live in Massachusetts. So I've been in Massachusetts since a teenager. Especially, I've lived in, for those who know Boston, I've lived in Cambridge, and Somerville, and Malden. So these are those three cities, that area that I refer to as Metro north of 93, north of Boston. So that region is that's what shapes my life. The stories, whatever happened, whatever I'm seeing, whatever I'm observing. I've been observing the last 40, 45 years. My um, it's my history. This is what I've seen. So this is what shaped my life. This is what shaped my views of the world. I mean, in addition to traveling, but where I live, especially when I speak about civic education. So where I lived for over 45 years, have affected my view of the world, my view of black people, my view of other uh, of the global world, if I may. But anyway, so let me go back to for the elections of 2019 that took us to the inauguration of 2020. I did write a report about that, but they didn't publish it. But that Monday night of inauguration of 2020 in Everett took me to look at to read other inaugurations that occurred on January 6, 2020. So from living in the same streets of those that took oath on that January 2020, January 6, 2020, from living in the same streets to their parents being part of the church community, to living in large immigrant enclaves, to receiving services in community agencies as non-immigrants, to serving immigrants as part of their daytime work, going to the same church. The known generation of leaders who were sworn in Monday night, that Monday, January 6, 2020, they were not strangers to me at all. So the only elected official that was a stranger to me was Jimmy Trilly, was a Ward 4 councillor in that town. So I looked at other elected officials on that night, and then I'm going to look at currently. So we are doing this in 2022. So I started in 2020. That's I wrote this down. People can say I wrote this text back in 2020, but I sent it to a reporter, but she didn't. I mean, I've been writing to reporters for years. They just ignore me. But now with YouTube, you don't need a reporter for YouTube. With Facebook, with Zoom, we don't need a reporter for that. So I did have it in writing, but I did submit it. They didn't publish it. But anyway, so right in Malden, there was Joe Gray, who was from Trinidad, a school committee, Malden School Committee, or Ward 6, Girlie Adrian, whose campaign I worked in, Everett City Council at large, at large. So she was the first Haitian elected in Everett, Massachusetts. Stephanie Martins was from Brazil, Ward 2. Jimmy Trilly, Ward 2, Ward 4 in Everett. We have Marconi Almeida Barros, Ward 5 in Everett. Wilfred Barr, he was elected city councilor at large. That in 2020 was his second term, so he was a non-immigrant. I considered him as a non-immigrant who came to this country 2010 and went for office probably a year or two after he became citizen. So he was always involved, came part of the immigrant offices. He used to come in immigrant agencies, so he came as a non-immigrant and was elected in maybe a year or two after he became citizen. So William MBA Barr, Wilfred Barr, city councilor at large in Somerville, Massachusetts. Eunice DeLise Ziegler. So in 2020, she sworn in as her second term in Methuen, Massachusetts. Is district councilor in Methuen, Massachusetts. And I know she used to live as a kid, the 10-year-old, she used to live next to my house. So I remember when I first came to that street, she was there. So these are, I have them because they are all people I know. Sambal Siddiqui, she was elected mayor of Cambridge by other city council members for 2020-2021. And that was her second term as Cambridge City Council. And within the context of history, we can mention Haitian American Emmanuel Marsh, who served as Malden Ward 2 School Committee member from 2015-2017. He lost his bid for re-election by maybe no more than 3 votes. He lost in 2017. There was Uganda American Charlene Nabulime, Nabulime. She was elected Ward 6 councillor in Waltham, and in 2018, but in 2019 she lost in November 2019. So this year, as I'm recording this, there is she's not an immigrant, but she's like somebody who moved to Boston from Michigan. Lydia Edwards, she was elected to a special election to represent First Suffolk and Middlesex seat back. In 20. She was just sworn in 2022. So it was a special election. Her election to city council, Everett city council, Boston City Council. That was very captivating because this is an area, East Boston, Charlestown, the North End. So these are areas that are, I'll say, Italian, run by Italians. So it's amazing that she won. So we have like a switch that is happening in terms of elected officials, like who represent like mainly a white demographics, I would say, a white constituent. So East Boston is becoming a lot Hispanics, but Charlestown, North End. So these are as a Italian, white, Irish enclave. So she will represent, Lydia will represent, depending on when you are viewing this, or is representing First Suffolk, Middlesex, which is East Boston, Charlestown, North End, Winthrop, Revere, part of Cambridge. And also redistricting will change some of these boundaries for the next election, which will happen in the fall. So that's another issue we can talk about, redistricting, how this affects remapping. Sometimes they say remapping, how it affects us as immigrants, as people of color, as I say, but I don't like the expression people of color. So either say black, I mean, I speak from an immigrant perspective or from a black perspective. We'll say, I say black, because people of color in my country is like when you're washing clothes, you separate the color and the white, and then sometimes they attribute certain expressions to us as black folks, and then the black experience is lost within the framework of people of color. So the people of color, we are different. I mean, we have issues. I mean, I don't want to separate blacks, but the black immigrant experience is different from the African American, slightly different. I mean, we have a lot of similarities. We have Africa, which is our roots, but being there as slaves, I think African American call it adults. African American from the South of slave backgrounds, but there's that abbreviation of African American of descendant of slaves, American descendant of slaves. So their experience is different. Us as black immigrants who came here, we don't have that racism experience. We have classism or colorism, but these are different experiences that we will talk. But this is the first one I'm talking about, election. So I've wanted to talk about that since 2020. But the Lydia's election, and we have another one, most recent one was elected in from Florida, Broward County, in West Palm. Her name is Sheila Sherphilus McCormick. She will represent. She will be the first Haitian Democrat elected to Congress. So she will represent the 20th congressional district of in Florida. So it's Broward and West Palm. So this is a very exciting election. I'm very pleased. I'm not only pleased because she's Haitian, but I think because of her wealth, I'm very struck by that. She put $6 million of her own money in that congressional campaign, and then her earning for last year, is $6 million. Was $6 million. She reported that she raised that she poured $6 million of her own money, and then she has earning was $6 million a year from last year's taxes. But I mean, black women, and the Boston Globe had an article where a black woman is worth like $8. So to have a black woman, a daughter of an immigrant, putting $6 million in the campaign and earning $6 million a year, so this is she is exceptionally and accomplished professionally and financially an accomplished Haitian American woman. I say congratulations. So I rarely see, be it national, state, or local campaigns. I don't know. I'm not aware of any black person who had put $6 million of their own money in their campaign or who earns $6 million. So she owns a home care, Trinity Home Care business. So that's what she made the money from. And also I mentioned in that that campaign that she just won. That was back in just last week in December. No, January. She just won in January. So the reason I'm bringing that also because elections are not only in September or November, but special elections happen. Like Lydia's special election just happened. It happened in December, the primary and the final. She took office in January. So elections. So we have to pay careful attention to elections. For instance, in Malden, Mass, there will be an election, or there is an election on January 25th. So it depends when you are watching this program. So there's an election in Malden, Massachusetts on January 25th. So we wouldn't take of that. They want the voters to vote whether they will to accept the $317,000 to construct a no vocational school in Wakefield. So the vocational school takes students from various parts, from Malden, Revere, Wakefield. So it's in one city, but it takes students from various cities. So they have to vote. So citizens from the cities where the students go, vocational school, voc ed, so they have to vote to accept should they spend 317 million something $217 million to build a school. So those cities will contribute from 200,000 a year to $1 million a year to that school that's being built in a city called Wakefield, Massachusetts. So it's just those minor. I mean, we think it's minor, but it's that we have to pay attention constantly, not just when there are presidential elections or gubernatorial elections, but we have to pay attention every day what is happening. So there's one on January 25th. We don't think there will be election on January 25th. I remember I was in New Orleans in the summer. It was in July at the building at Xavier University. I mean, I just think people were voting something like school lunches, budget for a school lunch. So it was something I think, wow, what kind of voting is that? So people, will be called. Elections will be called for, every thing that concerns the citizen, I would say. So this one is voted, and I've seen it on school lunches. So, and there are ballot questions usually come on like a major elections, but those those elections that take place, let's say somebody dies, somebody, I think in Miami, it was Florida, that's Florida, Broward County, the Sheila Phyllis McCormick, it's the previous congressional district died in April, but people were surprised. For 280 days. So the 20th congressional district in Florida did not have a U.S. rep in Washington. So there are a lot of other political reasons for that. So votes have to be voted, things have to be voted upon. So that 20th congressional district did not have a rep. So it's important to pay attention whether it's the local election, municipal elections, and September or November. The main ones sometime in Florida. I was in Florida. It's May and August. So there are elections occurring at various times in the year. So we have to pay attention as immigrants. So sometimes they will come to us, to our churches, to our places only for presidential elections or city councils or gubernatorial elections. But those little things, those vocational schools, school lunches, city issues, so they matter. So we have to pay attention. And there's one last thing I want to mention. I'm in Boston when Congresswoman Ayanna Presley won over Capuano. That made news. But we have a very local election in Ward 5 in Everett, where we have a Vietnamese 21-year-old who's graduating from college this year, Vivian Nguyen. She won Ward 5 council race in Everett, 711 votes, whereas the incumbent had 442 votes. So she's like we think she's well-seated councilor. She was a council president, and the 21-year-old won, Vivian Nguyen. So I like to look at the children, sons and daughters of immigrants. I know Ayanna is not an immigrant, but to unseat, for a black woman to unseat a well-established career politicians like Capuano, that made the news. We have in Boston another daughter of immigrant, Michelle Wu, was elected as a mayor in Boston, the first woman and the first non-white to be elected in Boston. So I just want to say thank you for watching this episode of Diaspo Voice. This is about one part of civic education, but we will do others. We will talk more about civic participation, elections, and voting, and donating to elected officials. Sometimes they say we tend not to donate, but it's good to donate. It's good to volunteer for them. You learn. I've been volunteering since 1992, even though I don't say a voice for the black immigrants, but I just have been volunteering since 1992, and also I ran for office in 2009, and I take classes too. You know, you have to learn. As an educator, I believe we have to learn, so I take classes in running for office and knowing about the state house, how state house works, how Capitol Hill works. Like during my training in my theological training, I had classes in church and government. So I kind of know. I mean, I don't think I know, but I have an idea of how those how government functions. I remember when I was in high school, I took a class. Some high schools they have you take classes in college, so I took a class in college, the American political system. So that was my first. That was years ago. You know, talking back in the 70s when I was in high school. So I never. I still have that book, America's political system, and I want to go over it, but I buy no books. I buy no books on the political system. So it's good to, as black immigrants, to be involved in politics. And I know sometimes we say church, we're not involved. That's another story. So as I said, I have a background in theology also. We tend to be more involved in church, but I can have a separate program on how as faith leaders. I'm a believer, but I'm involved in those little uh, side. Let's say the 25th, January 25th, there will be a special election, as I said in Malden, in voting for the construction to put the money, invest the money into building a high school, a voc high school, like several cities, to build a high school. And talk about new immigrants. I mean, somebody who came to the country in 2010 became a citizen in 2016. By 2020, Wilfred Ba was in his second term, so that's an immigrant who came to the country. So there's a Haitian immigrant too, who came in 2010, maybe a year or two after becoming a U.S. citizen. He ran for wide consulate wide in Brockton. He did win. He did serve a term, but he went for mayor and lost. And that happened to Ba too. Wilfred Ba. He won. He did his second term when I first wrote this in 2020, and then he ran for office. He did win the primary in Somerville, which is very interesting. This is a city that's being justified, going from working class to being a student, predominantly white, uh, engaging white community. But he won. He won the primary as a black immigrant. I was very surprised. He did win the primary, but he did not win the mayoral seat. So that was remarkable for him to win in the primary, but he lost. So I don't think Somerville doesn't have a black person in the council, and Everett doesn't either. So Gurley ran for mayor, and she also lost. But talking about somebody else who went for, it's worth mentioning as an immigrant herself too. Her name is Gerline Alcy Jabouin. She won. She ran for Everett at large, and she lost by 25 votes for the first time. So she had 1,962 votes, and the person Irene Cardillo who won had 1,987 votes. So it's good. So I hope she will be involved in the 25 votes she will win next time. So we want not only somebody to run, but we want you to win. And when you win, I know when people, especially like black people, they say they don't represent blacks. Of course they don't. But when you finish, after you serve your term, like William Ba, after he served his term as an immigrant, Girlie Adrian, after she had served her terms as a daughter of immigrant, so those people can go back and help the black population. We really need the voice, especially Haitians. We don't have a voice, and I cannot be a voice by myself. So we need help. So when you finish, I would say to the elected officials, after you serve your term, come back to the community, the black community, especially those of us who don't live in major cities, who don't live in Boston, who don't live in Miami, who don't live in Chicago. So the major urban cities, yes, have some voices, but those of us, what I refer to as suburban, like as suburban, mid-sized urban cities and towns, we don't have any reps. We don't have any voice. And where I live, they know I'm the only one talking. And there's a lot of blacks, 11,000. I live in a small town of 11,000 black people. We know most of them are Haitian, most of them are black immigrants. So we know it because we read the census. I worked for Census 2010, so I'm in the census emailing list, so I get the census numbers. But I can project one of the other days, like somebody wrote, where are the black folks? So it's noticeable that the blacks, but in the small urban towns in the north of Boston area, are not present, are not visible. So we need more voice. We need more presence. We need to be involved in municipal elections. We need to be involved in municipal events. We need to be involved in cultural events, not only about our countries, but we need to be involved in where our kids are going to be buried, where we're going to be buried. So we need to be involved in those cities and towns too. Okay, so I want to say thank you for watching our election diaspora voice and our role as black immigrants in the diaspora. So next time we'll do something else. We'll talk about faith. I think my next one is what is religion, what is faith, what is spirituality. That's what how as faith people we should be engaged also in elections in municipal, state, and local affairs. Thank you. Bye bye. That's it.